Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Tablas Creek Instagram Live broadcast. I'm Jason Haas, as always. I am super excited for my guest today. It's going to be Nadine Brown, who is just an amazing sommelier and restaurateur based in the DC area, and one of the early Tablas Creek advocates out there in the market and doing some super cool stuff now. So I'll be inviting Nadine to join me momentarily, but first, as I usually do, I want to show you some pictures as to what's going on here at the vineyard. So our big news is that we are able to reopen our tasting room as of about a week ago. So we've had to be closed because of California's stay-home order for about 2 months. We were able to reopen a little more than a week ago, and we're back to doing our outdoor, distanced, seated flight tastings by reservation. So we have 1 week under our belts back open. It's wonderful to hear the kind of hubbub of voices outside. It's lovely. So anyway, if you are local, it's probably not time to travel from long distances yet, but if you're local or a drive from here, we'd love to see you. In the vineyard, we are doing really two things. One, we're pruning. You can see, this is a picture that I took in the middle of our Marsan block. You can see on the left is a newly pruned row. On the right is a row that we haven't pruned yet. We're also watching things green up. We got a ton of rain 2 weeks ago, over a foot of rain, which is just unbelievable. We've never seen a storm so big. But the net results were almost entirely positive. We had almost all of it soak in. There's just a little bit of surface erosion. You can see this is on a vineyard road, which we lined with straw to keep the erosion down. So you can see it did flow a little bit on the surface, but we're not talking anything particularly destructive. And almost all of it soaked in. It's incredible. So to see things getting so much greener, I feel like you can see the cover crop growing by the day. And this is true in sections that's just the natural grasses like you see above. It's also true in sections that we've planted. So there are areas that we plant a specific cover crop mix, and this is what it looks like right now. It will look very different in 2 more weeks. A little overview of what the whole vineyard looks like. Again, it's getting green. We're about half pruned, and still half to go. We always start with the blocks that are the least prone to frost, and then finish with the ones that are the most prone. So Grenache Blanc, Viognier, Syrah. One look up a hill, again, you can see the difference between the pruned vines on the left and the not yet pruned vines on the right. In the cellar, we're getting ready to do our second bottling of the year. A couple weeks ago, during that storm, actually, we bottled our rosés, the Patalan Rosé and the Dianthus, and our Vermentino. So it's fun to have those back. Just sent out a note yesterday announcing the Patalan Rosé's release. And we have another bottling coming up in 2 weeks where we're doing some of the first of the reds from 2019. So that includes 100% Counoise, which will be fun to have back. Our 100% Grenache and our Côte de Tablas. So that's what's coming up. It's a lot of the normal winter work that we're doing. So getting the wines into bottles so that we have room to put the new blends in. We'll start blending in another month or so. And then in the vineyard, just getting through little by little of the pruning. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of the pictures, and I am going to invite Nadine to join me. She is. I'm sending the request. I'm going to guess, given the people I've talked to, that the landscape in DC is not looking like sunny and 65 degrees like this. Hey, Nadine.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Let me turn this music off. I've been on a Billie Eilish kick all of 2020.
I've been on a Phoebe Bridgers kick, so we're related at least.
It's so good to see you.
It is wonderful to see you. What are things like in DC right now?
It's a little gray today, but about 41 degrees, so not too bad. They keep saying that the real cold is coming, next week.
Yeah.
Like 11 degrees. But yeah, it's not too bad. definitely not as nice as Paso.
Yeah, it's kind of perfect right now. We're supposed to get some rain, maybe tomorrow night, which is nice. It'll be welcome. But
Mm.
for now, it's gorgeous. I mean, it's interesting walking around the vineyard because there's not a cloud in the sky, and there's not even, because of the pandemic, there's not even any contrails. Like normally in the winter, you have the blue sky with the contrails overhead from the airplanes flying from LA to San Francisco, and now it's nothing. It's just
Not so much.
feels like the sky from, I don't know, 200 years ago.
So is the drought officially over?
No,
No.
though we are up to normal rainfall for the year, because we were right in the crosshairs of that atmospheric river that hit 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So we got 12.7 inches of rain in a little under 3 days, which got us from like 10% of normal winter rainfall to date to 105%. But it's been dry since then. There's nothing big on the horizon. The storms that are supposed to hit over the next week or so are pretty little. And most of California didn't get that direct hit that we did. So it's we're fine. We'd like some more rain, and California, big picture, really still needs it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for having.
So I want people to get to know you a little bit. So you grew up in Jamaica and Puerto Rico.
Right.
Was wine a part of your life at all growing up?
No, some rum. I mean, both Jamaica and Puerto Rico, really known for rum and sugarcane and other stuff. So no, I think I was, like a lot of people, I think I started in college. I was 12 when I left Jamaica and went to junior high and high school in Puerto Rico, and then went off to Boston for school. I was studying social work. And I got to Boston in 1991. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Perfect Storm. That was the year of that nor'easter, was the year that I decided to go from San Juan to Boston. But I had a great time in Boston. And Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill, is probably where I started in Jack Daniel coolers, like everybody, a lot of people. Although I feel today, a lot of 21-year-olds are starting, at a different place than we did.
Yeah, and I feel like there's been a lot of buzz in the last few years about how millennials are not picking up wine as fast as the industry experts had hoped that they would. And I always go back to the idea that still they're way ahead of where we were at that same time. I mean, you think,
Yeah.
I mean, nobody was drinking wine like when I was in college. It just wasn't even a thing.
Yeah. And too, I think we forget that the oldest millennials are over 40 now. I think in our heads, we still have a different picture of what a millennial is. We have to kind of reach them where they are. We'll get into that. We got to find other ways to communicate with people. And I think this is a great venue.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So college studying social work. So how do you make that move from that into restaurants?
Yeah, so I graduated in 95 and stayed in Boston for about another year and a half. Broke up with some jerk, and I was like, I'm moving home. Because when I moved from Puerto Rico to Boston, my mom moved from Puerto Rico to DC. So that's when I came to DC for the first time and moved back home and tried to find a job in the field, and was having a hard time. It was kind of the beginning of the summer. I worked at Moto Photo developing film. I said that to some people, are like, what? You had to take your film somewhere to get it developed. And then there was an ad for a paper looking new French restaurant opening on Bistro Bis. They were looking for a hostess, no experience necessary. And I answered the ad and got the job. And it was Gordon Lee who answered the phone. British, with his thick British accent. And, that was over 20 years now, about 20 years ago. And never looked back. I fell in love with the restaurant industry and the energy and, the chaos and, and then eventually, the wine. I talk a lot about Vineyard Brands and your brother. And, his cellar being a lot of the first wines I ever had. And that really allowed me to jump from Boone's Farm to Montrachet, like really fast, really fast. So I was,
That's a bit of a leap.
It was, even before I really in Salon, just, Vineyard Brands, your dad's, amazing, business that he put together. So, yeah. So I, started as a host at Beast and worked my way up to manager, and I never really waited tables in before, and wine was my weak spot, as a manager. I took a French class at the USDA, where like the State Department send their people to get languages, to go off. Really just to help with my pronunciation of French wines, because the list was heavy, it was a French bistro.
Right.
I took about 3 classes maybe, Then they started conjugating verbs. I'm like, I just want to know how to say Chateauneuf de Pape, but and so I was driven without even really knowing that I was driven, right? Because at the time there weren't a lot of, not that there weren't a lot of somms in the city. There were general managers that did the wine program, managers. Mark Slater really comes top of mind. He was at Citronelle as one of the, kind of standalone sommeliers.
So when you started getting interested in wine, what was your wine education? Like, was it really hanging out with my brother and drinking through his cellar, or
that was a lot of it, like drinking these incredible wines, and then going back and reading about them. I started really from reading about the history. History was a big hook for me.
Yeah.
I remember reading, it was an old book about Champagne, war and wine, how the French hid their wines and how they, in the cellars, and had butcher shops and schools, under, while they were bombing above it. I mean, it's still fascinating, just wine history. Was kind of the first hook. And then I took it was like a wine captain class. It was like 11 weeks, pretty intense. That was my first, formal wine certification, if you will.
There's a question that came in here from Carrie Lynn Strong, asking if you ever felt pressure not to go into the wine industry.
No.
No. At least the way I interpreted the question was like, well, you trained to do social work. Like, did you feel like somehow you were
like a sellout,
not fulfilling your educational mission or investment or something like that?
I didn't, not at the time. It was just really fascinating to me. And it was a hot restaurant. I was seating, Ted Kennedy and Hillary Clinton. And there was, just a lot of, Q-tip, like it was just a hot place to be. So I wasn't. And since then I volunteer and do a lot of stuff with a lot of charities. Share Our Strength is one that I work with a lot, and you guys have donated and helped me with wine, throughout the years for that. So I've, do other things, and now like being on the boards of organizations to, to fill that part of me, and even being a mentor now, just helps take care of that part of it. But no, after Salon, it was no looking back.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand the question, because whatever, I have a master's degree in archaeology, and there's lots of people who are like, okay, you studied economics, you have a master's degree in archaeology, and you run a winery? Like,
yeah. But there's a lot of that in the restaurant and business,
totally.
And the, biologists and accountants and lawyers, and like they get to what they're doing and they're like, I hate this, I'm gonna, follow my passion.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of that in our, almost self-selecting in the industry.
And I love your comment about how history is kind of a hook into wine, because wine is a product that's so tied to place and to people and to the kind of historical moment that it's made, that I do feel like there's aspects that you can come almost from anywhere, from any discipline and any set of interests, and find your place in the world of wine.
Yeah, I've heard that a couple people say that about the 2020 vintage, and still getting it and still supporting it because it was, because of what was going on at that time, and 10 years later, being able to open it, and just that connection
Yeah.
with wine and history, and then there are all the other rabbit holes. I got involved with the Court of Master Sommeliers, and I feel like I don't have a big pin for a lot of reasons. I had kids and a mortgage and other other stuff.
Yeah.
But the geology and the history and the science and the chemistry, all of the webs of wine was also interesting. But I would be reading about how sharp wood imparts a vanilla flavor, especially American wood. And then I get a book on vanilla, like a whole book about vanilla, which is an orchid, and go down that rabbit hole. I have books on tea that, I got from being sparked through wine, to learn more about tea and how it's grown and the people that pick it. So
Yeah.
I'm curious about a lot of different things, which I think which made me good on the floor, because I could talk to a lot of different people. I know a little bit about a lot.
For sure.
Yeah.
And a lot about a lot too, in my experience. So I read this awesome quote that I can't remember which interview with you it was in, but it was something along the lines of, people aren't going out to eat because they're hungry. Right. That they're going out to eat for some richer experience than that.
Yeah.
So how did that kind of idea shape the way that you thought about wine and wine service?
Yeah. And I think that, of course people go out to eat, but it's hopefully will again, multi-billion-dollar industry, because of the experience. And I'm really, don't like the word passionate, but someone give me another word for passionate. Just passionate about his hospitality. And that started at the host stand. Sally Boobin, Jeffrey Boobin is the chef of Bistro Beast and is still there. I spent a lot of time with her at the host stand, and she said to treat people like you would if they were coming over to your house, and another mentor of mine, the late Herb Kaplan, who was just great. I've been really lucky to work with a lot of people that got the hospitality part of it. Keith Goldston, and I'm not, name dropping, Keith Goldston, who's an MS and put the program together at Charlie Palmer. He does this like little mini bow at tables, and he's very, he got a crew cup, but he's very humble and grounded. And I was lucky to learn that core from a lot of people that I saw.
So this seems like a good transition into talking about the program that you built at Charlie Palmer Steak, which I think it's amazing, first of all, that you were able to find wines from all 50 states to make all of the senators and representatives who might want to bring people in,
right,
have a little piece of their home turf there.
Right.
But you did a lot more than that. I mean, it was an incredibly deep and rich wine program and events that you were involved in. And can you talk a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah. So, I was still at Beast when an investor that was getting investors together for Charlie's restaurant told me, Charlie Palmer's coming to town. The name, I hadn't heard of him. I thought Charlie Trotter, like a lot of people did. I made a trip up to Oriole and checked it out. It was the old location. Brian Voltaggio was the sous chef at the time. I had my resume in hand to give it to him, and he happened to be off that day. So by the time I got to them, they already had their somm team. And they're like, you can come in as a captain, which I did. And, I would go in and do training with the service staff and then stay with the wine team, putting in wine, breaking out bottles, just volunteering my time. And I remember, servers like, you're not getting paid for this. I'm like, I'm learning for free. I'd always kind of, did that, even just moving from the host stand to a manager, before I was ready. And every job I feel like I've taken, I wasn't quite ready, but you just, fake it till you make it kind of thing. What was I saying?
building the wine program at
Bringing the wine program,
at
yeah.
Charlie Palmer.
And I think it was Keith's idea, because he was at Oriole in Vegas with Charlie, and he was driving down the strip, and you've been to the restaurant. The dining room overlooks the Capitol. It's the closest private building to the U.S. Capitol, so it's a gorgeous. The whole front of the restaurant is windows, so it just kind of made sense, from where it was. He had Dry Creek Kitchen in Sonoma, and I think they're all Sonoma wines. So that's where the idea of really highlighting and supporting American wines came from. We never had all 50 states, to be completely honest, on papers. And even no matter how much I said that, it's still, still printed we had all 50 states. But that's when I got on my Free the Grapes soapbox, and, shipping issues. And that was probably the biggest issue in getting, some wines from some states. There might have been some stuff done that I won't say publicly. I got dandelion wine from Alaska through, means and ways. It became the principle of the thing. I'm like, I could go down to Walmart and get enough ammunition, but I'm not going to get. That's another conversation. But yeah, it was really important to me you had to, drink the Kool-Aid, as they say. I get asked a lot of times if it felt limiting, and at times it did. But I think if you're going to do it, you have to just really believe in it, and find a focus, even within the American wine. So one of my focuses was smaller producers, trying to find, varietals other than Cab and Chardonnay, grown around the country, which, you guys made me look like a rock star every time. And people would come in, still referring to those wines. Like, I want a Chianti, or I want, whatever it was. And me, because I'm a translator. I think, as a sommelier, I think I'm a translator. Listening to people tell me what they want, and going through the catalogs of wines in my head, and, and matching them up. If it was from another state, trying to find wineries that were using grapes from that state, but It didn't have to be, because I knew, like, starting out, they would get wines from California for the first couple of years until their vineyards, came into fruition, or a lot of experimentation, right? I mean, I don't have any Tablas Creek in my house, but I have '07 Bocastel, and I don't when these guys started, compared to, some wineries in Pennsylvania or some other places, that are on their 8th leaf, or, right. Something. So there's, American wine industry has a longer legacy than I think people think, but it's also really, really young.
Yeah.
Right. It might as well be yesterday.
And you're surrounded by sort of one of those up and coming hotbeds with what's going on in Virginia, what's going on in Maryland. I mean, that's sort of one of the little interesting nexuses right now of places that are more and more, I think, making wines that can stand proudly with the other great wine regions of America. Yeah.
And I think sometimes, almost, especially with Virginia, I feel like they almost have more accolades internationally than, on the West Coast. I think Decanter is always writing about Virginia wines. And, for a lot of the states, when, helicopter winemakers start going there, I think it helps to lead credibility. People from South Africa coming to Virginia to make wines, or, different places, just that, that sharing of knowledge that's global.
And I mean, it's You point out something really, I think, relevant about California is that, and I think it's true of a lot of wine producing areas, it's that it's hard for people to it's hard to get wines from outside of the area that's producing the wines if you're in that area. So,
Yeah,
I mean, it's hard for me to find wines from Oregon and Washington in
really.
California.
Yeah,
Um, Not that I can't find them if I look, if I want to order them from a great wine shop in LA or San Francisco, but like they're not on local restaurant lists. They're not at the local Albertsons. I mean,
yeah,
they're not easy. And so like talking to people about Virginia wines or New York State wines or I mean, even places that have pretty established traditions, I mean, I can understand why a place like England might be able to take a more objective view as to what's out there in America than
right.
somebody sitting in the Bay Area
Yeah,
or here in Paso Robles.
yeah. So I think that, when I say drink local, I've kind of changed it to drink local wherever you are. And, if you're visiting other places, it's a great way to learn, even if you're just visiting another state, right? I think we think about it, we're visiting another country, getting to know the people through the food and the wine is just a great way to do it. It's the same thing, if you're visiting Virginia, visit Virginia wine country. And the other thing I did with, a lot of the states was, I tasted through all the stuff that wasn't really good and found the best one. So, I did that for everybody.
Yeah, you were helping
Yeah,
these up and coming regions put their best foot forward, which
yeah,
everybody needs
absolutely.
somebody
Because,
who does that for them.
yeah, why publicize that and do that and then sell a Maryland wine that's just gosh awful. That's just defeating the whole purpose.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what was your first experience with Tablas Creek? When was it first? Do you remember when it first
When was
crossed
your
your
first
path?
vintage? I was trying to think. I was thinking back to Beast. I don't know if it was at Beast or at Charlie Palmer's. When was your first vintage?
97
'97.
was the first vintage.
Yeah.
And that was pretty limited. I mean, those first couple of years, we were only making like a couple thousand cases of wine, though
Yeah.
my brother always did a pretty good job of making sure that a good chunk of that was sold in his territory.
Yeah. So it was probably Charlie, the first time, that I can remember at Charlie Palmer's.
Um, yeah, I know that there was a stretch where you were selling like half of the wine that our distributor was selling in DC was going out through Charlie Palmer's. I think you probably introduced more people on the East Coast to Tablas Creek than anybody else that I know.
Yeah. No, it still is. It was amazing wine. And I did buy the glass a lot.
Yeah.
For, where else were you going to find, especially when you started the neighbors, the Patalon,
Yeah.
Blanc and Rouge. And at the time, you changed it from Esprit de Beaucastel, right? It's just
Right, to Esprit de Tablas.
Esprit de Tablas. And then you guys, you must do. I've never been. I can't wait to visit. But you do a good job out there. There are a couple wineries like Frank Family, Tablas, where people would recognize it on the list and connect it to visiting you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's I think the most powerful thing about having a tasting room and welcoming people out to the winery is that it gives them an association with a product. It's a memory, it's a place, and so if you give them a good experience, then when they see it on a list, they see it on a shelf, they can relive that experience by ordering the wine, which is, I mean, that's great for everybody involved.
Yeah. And you can't buy that. I mean, I made 2 posts, about this chat yesterday, and I know you saw some of the feedbacks. Just there's a lot of, it's not goodwill, but people just love Tablas, and the response like, oh my God, they're so great and great people, and a lot of people make great wine, and I think that's one of the things that distinguishes good wine from really great wine. Because
Yeah.
I include people in terroir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does matter. You're right. There's lots of great wine out there. And I realized pretty early on that like we needed to tell our story in a way that people would remember, because we felt pretty good about the wines that we were making, but we didn't, like, we were making wines kind of without a category, at least not a very well established category, from a place that people didn't know very well yet, made from grapes they couldn't pronounce. So there were a lot of hurdles that we had to get people over. And I thought that the easiest way, or like a really critical piece of doing that, was giving people a great experience when they were here, so that then they would go out and tell the story. They sort of become their own, or like advocates out there in the marketplace.
Yeah. And, because the list was all American, 89, 90% California, I think, almost by default. And some people would come in, they're like, oh, you only have American wine, there's going to be nothing here, so your wines, and Virginia wines also, because they tend to be a little, less alcohol, a little bit more old world style, helped me, give people a lot of aha moments. And then the age worthiness of your wines, having back vintages and some depth in your wines also.
Yeah, it is nice to be on an all-American wine list, because we do stand out for being sort of this hybrid with certainly some classic European characteristics as well as the American. So tell people sort of what you're working on now. I mean, there's lots of different interesting projects. I love the conversation series that you're doing with different people in the world of wine. I know you're serving on different boards also. So give people sort of a sense of of the different projects that you're involved in.
Yeah, so I started, Wine Connection Wine Series, which is kind of sputtering. I need to be more consistent and do it at the same time, the same day. But that's funny. I want to talk to, I think Mike Thompson was the first one. And my next one is going to be with Michael Brown, and, another one with a friend who was a cellar worker for a long time. So just different, wine is a great connector. I think there's a lot of things for us that we don't agree on, but this thing, is something that we can agree on. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. And, I'm home with 2 dogs, a fish. Well, the fish died. 2 kids, a dog, and a fish. But it helps. It helps with connection. Doing a little bit of writing. Trying to get into wine writing. I started a company called At Your Service, where I do virtual wine events, which is going well. I've been on the board of the Restaurant Association here in DC that represents DC, Maryland, Virginia, which I'm really proud of, from starting at the host stand, and really, I know the restaurant industry will come back. It probably won't be the same, but I really, it's one of the few places where you can do that still. I feel like the jobs of working on the GM line and becoming the CEO are not as much as they were 40 years ago, but restaurants definitely, if you work and, I can't even find the words, of the possibilities that it gives you. So just, trying to stay busy. The other one is the Veraison Project, which is a new nonprofit, and we're just working to get more people of color into the wine industry. We just picked our first 10 grantees. We're giving them funds to get a certification of their choice, because it's, you don't have to get certification, but I think it's still important. And I think it's important, especially for people of color, sometimes just to get into the door. And if you look on jobs, they're asking for, at least an entry level certification. Working with distributors. Vineyard Brands is actually a partner of ours, giving cases to help with blind tasting. Just all the things that can be barriers. Because it's expensive,
Yeah.
Getting wines to taste, and especially if you're not part of a tasting group where you can share that burden. Connecting people with mentors, and mentors could be something as easily as passing someone's resume along, because that's how a lot of jobs, a lot of
Yeah.
people get jobs. Just I know someone who's looking for someone, and someone's over here, and helping marry them. We're putting together master classes, which sounds like a big thing, but it could be 15 minutes, talking about what it's like to be a general manager, of a wine estate, or, sales. I think so being a sommelier is great, but there's distribution, there's compliance, there's a lot in the wine industry. I did sales right before March for Constantine, a small distributor.
Yeah.
And a lot of people said that transition was hard. And I was like, yeah, I know, I know people I can sell wine, but that transition was really hard. And I wish I'd had, if I'd had a mentor or someone, just stuff that you won't learn. There's a lot of stuff that you don't learn through the certification. Like how to set up your territory, where to park. I'd wake up on Mondays. Okay, where am I going to go today? No, you needed to know 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
where you're going to go. And just having access to people that have that information and sharing that knowledge. Yeah.
Cool. I think that work is so important. I feel like the wine industry over the last 8-9 months has come to this overdue realization that the demographics of a lot of the people who are running the companies does not match very well with the diversity of the audience that's out there. I mean, the wine consumers are all sorts of different demographics, different ethnic backgrounds, and I don't feel like the wine community has done a particularly good job of really being welcoming and inclusive of that level of diversity. So I feel like it's been a little better over the last 8 months, and that people have been looking for great voices of color to talk about wine and to be a part of discussions. But the ideas of what the Veraison Project is doing, just getting people into the pipeline, getting people connected with the opportunities that are out there, and trying to help them over the barriers that have been put up either intentionally or unintentionally. It's such important work. So
yeah,
thank you.
And exposure on both sides. Sometimes last year, 2019, time on this time continuum. Like where are we? I was at a tasting and someone tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around, a young African-American young lady, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, Nadine, I've been following your career. I saw you in the Washingtonian. I was a junior in college, and you were kind of the first person I saw." And we throw these words around, representation matters, but that's when it really kind of clicked, that it was, just seeing someone in that space, igniting that thought, even just the thought that it could be possible. So yeah, it's really important. And on the flip side, it's kind of an untapped, what's the spending power? It's like $1.2 trillion.
Huge, yeah.
Dollars that are going to cognac right now. Like cognac is figured out. Yeah. In terms of and there has been a lot of improvement, and I think a lot of these groups, the Roots Fund, Veraison Project, Wine Unify, will help the conversation, keep the conversation going, because I think it happens and then it kind of dies down. But I think these organizations and conversations will keep the momentum, which is what we need. So it's not just going back. I have some old magazines here, like an old Spectator, like from 2008. just flipping through the pictures. And if you looked at one today, they're definitely, even just on that level, there are a lot more brown people, more women, in that magazine.
Yep. No, it's unnecessary and overdue course correction, I think, for the wine community. Okay, I can't believe that it has already been 40 minutes. I could sit and talk to you all day.
That's awesome.
But I want to be sensitive to your time.
Awesome.
So if people want to learn more about what you're doing or follow you on different social media channels or anything else, how do they do that? How do they discover you?
Yeah, so I'm still, finalizing the website for At Your Service, which is the name of the LLC. But here on Instagram really is really the easiest way through DMs. I think my email is on my profile, or I've been trying to figure out how to get my email on my profile, but here on the Instagram.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much. It's fun to sit down and catch up. It feels like too long since we were sitting across the table from each other. But hopefully before too much longer, we'll be able to get back on the road and either I'll get to see you in DC or I'll see you out here.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you, Nadine.
Right.
Thank you everybody who joined us today. I will look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks. So cheers.
Bye.